Hi, welcome back to another episode of Warded Door. Today we're going to cover DM discretion. What is it and when should we be using it? DM discretion is the good judgment of your dungeon master whenever something is not completely clear. They just kind of make a call on the fly to keep the game moving, or they make a choice to get the game back on track, something along those lines. Now, it is a tool that can be abused. So, we're going to go over when to use it, when not to use it. When you shouldn't be using it is if you're fighting with your players and you try to overpower them. So, if you're getting in an argument across the table, that's probably a bad time to be using it. So, when can you use it? Not here. The one resource players always have access to is the player's handbook. Now, if they are at all well read in the player's handbook, you don't want to just change the rules. Years ago, I had a cousin walk up to me and he explained that during the 3.5 era of D&D, the DM never gave him his warhorse and he was playing a paladin. Now that is part of the numerical progression to keep it balanced. So without the warhorse, he might as well have been a fighter. But because he wasn't, he lost out on all the cool fighter things. Now in this case, the DM was using his discretion, but really what was happening was he didn't want to have to deal with the rules of a player having a mount. So he ignored it entirely, taking his players' toys away. That is not discretion, that is him shirking the rules. Worse yet, it's shirking a rule that gave the player an advantage in something that took away from his character. So, discretion is not changing the rules in the player's handbook. It's also not changing the rules in the Dungeon Master Guide. However, of all of the books here, I would say this one is the most flexible. Unless you want to dive in every time, and it is a reference book, that is what it's for. If you can make something go on the fly to make the game go a little more quickly and it doesn't change anything drastically, there's a great time to use discretion. Or when something's not spelled out in the DMG exactly as it should be, or maybe you just don't want to comb through it for half an hour trying to figure out exactly what you should be doing. Now, the monsters in this game are something that DMs really like to stretch. They really like to use discretion with the monster manual. But it's not used to stretch encounters. That way it's more satisfying for the DM. Now, if you have a player that has also DM'd and is well read in this, and you start changing things, you're going to lose respect from your players, right? Sometimes the players blow up an encounter, sometimes the monsters blow up an encounter. By that I mean sometimes the dice work heavily in the player's favor, other times they work heavily in the monster's favor. That's a good reason to have a DM screen. That way you don't have to kill the players every time you roll a 20. Maybe it's just a hit, maybe not a hit at all. Discretion's a great thing to use when you don't want to end the game, but you don't want to be outright changing the stats of something because they may know. You don't want to all of a sudden add immunity to something that doesn't have it, hit points to something that should be down, or an extra attack for something that didn't quite execute the way you wanted to with the players on the board. Playing on a grid, whether it be a virtual tabletop or just some squares out in front of you on the table, there's another point where it's hard to use discretion. And by discretion, again, I mean you twisting something around. Players can see plainly where they are, where they can move, the type of area of effect their spell takes up. So this is going to be one of those instances that's inappropriate to use discretion because it's not truly discretion, it's you trying to stretch an encounter. Sometimes you eat the bar, sometimes it eats you. So, let's review what discretion is and what it is not. The rules are the rules for a reason. So everybody can play the game consistently and it's fair to everyone, DM and player alike. Also, shouldn't be used to expedite the game. right? You're caught up in something. You don't have time to dive into the reference. You have momentum, and all of a sudden it bottoms out because you can't find something obscure. Now, is that a good excuse to slow down? Probably not. A great time to use your discretion is to say yes, not no. Situations come up that could be overly complicated, so use your discretion to work in favor of the player. Whenever you use discretion to benefit yourself or your monsters or your environment, there's the chance that players know you're doing it and they feel cheated. Lastly, if you know it's BS, be ready to be called on it because you're wrong. And you shouldn't be twisting the rules in your favor so that the players are working at a disadvantage. It's not fair to them, and it soils the wholesome aspect in the fairness of what this game is. So use your discretion wisely, people. High wisdom score. That's where it's at. Thanks for watching. If you like my video, like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like my video, sucks to suck. And I mean you, not me.